I always thought my retirement would be quiet. After 2 decades of dealing with bureaucrats, shady developers, and corrupt surveyors as a federal land inspector, I figured I'd earned the right to be left the hell alone. So 5 years ago, I cashed out, bought 9 acres of rugged Colorado hillside just outside of Grand Junction, and built the kind of home I'd only sketched out on bar napkins during agency conferences. 2 stories of pine-beamed glory, with a wraparound porch, a full workshop below, and a viewing terrace that let me watch the storms roll in from Utah. There wasn't a neighbor in sight. That was the point. The land had previously belonged to a logging company, and I made damn sure every inch was surveyed, notarized, and stamped 6 ways from Sunday before I ever poured concrete. The title was clean, the coordinates were clean, and my conscience was clear. No HOA, no bylaws, no Karen. At least, not back then. A couple of years after I settled in, some bright-eyed developers built an upscale gated community right down the ridge. Blue Haven Ridge, they called it. Sounded like a laundry detergent. I figured it didn't matter. Their property line sat a good 300 feet from mine. I kept to myself. Occasionally I'd pass a few of them at the hardware store. Tight smiles, stiff nods, that sort of neighborhood. Then came Karen. Karen Hasslinger rolled in about 10 months ago with a platinum SUV, matching dog, and a real estate business that, from what I could tell, thrived on selling exclusivity and suburban conformity. Her house, a bloated Mediterranean-style thing with faux columns and solar panels she never bothered to activate, was built right up against the border of my lot. If it were any closer, I'd have to charge her rent for the shade. She introduced herself with a typed letter, delivered in a gold-embossed envelope, asking me to repaint my non-compliant garage door to match neighborhood tones. That was the first clue. I ignored it. Then came the one about my fence height, violating Visual Uniformity Code 4.3. Cute. I didn't respond. After all, I wasn't a member of their HOA. Never had been. Never would be. Didn't stop her from trying. Over the next few months, the letters kept coming. Sometimes they were printed on HOA letterhead. Sometimes they were just hand-signed by Karen with little hearts over the I. There were complaints about the slope of my gravel driveway, the visibility of my tool shed from certain rear windows, and, my personal favorite, the fact that I sometimes left my porch lights on overnight, creating what she referred to as aesthetically jarring nocturnal pollution. My response was consistent. I tossed them all in the fireplace, but the pressure started to mount. I'd notice other Blue Haven folks glancing toward my land like I was some kind of wild coyote squatting on the edge of paradise. One family even installed an extra-tall privacy hedge that blocked out a full quarter of their western view, just so they wouldn't have to look at my unfinished cabin, which, by the way, was architecturally registered and locally celebrated by the Regional Builders Guild. Not that that mattered to Karen. I got the distinct sense that she wasn't just irritated, she was planning something. The letters started referencing community cohesion, property value preservation, and voluntary compliance opportunities. Bureaucratic gobbledygook, but I'd heard it all before, usually right before someone got sued. Then, one brisk Tuesday morning in October, I caught her standing on my side of the boundary line, holding what looked like a clipboard and pointing her phone at my solar panels. She didn't even flinch when I stepped outside and said, "You're trespassing." "Oh, I'm just gathering information," she chirped, like she was filing a birdwatching log. "For what, exactly?" I asked. She smiled. "Let's just say it's time we settled some things." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just passive-aggressive posturing anymore. Karen was gearing up for a move, and I had a bad feeling she was about to make it official. A week later, the war began. I was working on my lathe in the workshop, turning a piece of juniper for a custom table leg, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands, stepped out into the sunlight, and there she was. Karen, in a navy blue pantsuit, standing at the edge of my porch with a smug little smile and a man by her side. He looked barely 30, in a cheap suit, 2 sizes too big, gripping a faux leather briefcase like he'd stolen it from a paralegal supply closet. "Thomas Edgrington," he asked, unfolding a file folder. "You've been served." He handed me a packet. At first, I thought it was some local permit nonsense. But no, this was a formal notice from Blue Haven Ridge HOA's legal counsel. Inside was a cover letter, a violation summary, and a map. A hand-drawn map, no less. One that looked like it had been copied from Google Earth, and then mutilated in Microsoft Paint by someone with a shaky mouse hand. According to this creative document, my house, specifically the northwest corner of my garage and part of the workshop roof, now protruded approximately 24 feet into land legally owned by the Blue Haven Ridge Homeowners Association. That's how they worded it. Protruded. Like my house had oozed across the line like a particularly rude glacier. The letter demanded I cease unauthorized occupation, restore encroached land to community standard, and, this was the kicker, submit a proposal for voluntary transfer of improvements to the association or face escalated legal action. I stared at the page, then at Karen, then at the clipboard guy, who was already backing away like I might pull a shotgun from under my flannel. Karen stayed put, arms folded. "Your structure is in violation of our boundaries," she said, sweet as cyanide. "We're giving you an opportunity to resolve this amicably." "You think I built a house on someone else's land?" I asked. "Not someone else's," she corrected. "The community's." I nodded slowly. "And you did your due diligence before accusing me of theft?" "We conducted a thorough internal review," she said, and handed me a color printout. It was a copy of the same mangled satellite image with red lines scribbled across it. Our landscape committee determined the incursion using updated visual estimation. I let out a breath and took a step forward. "You've got 20 seconds to get off my property before I call the sheriff." Her expression didn't flicker. "We'll be following up shortly." "You just did," I said. "Now walk." They left, but not before she turned and said, loud enough for the neighbor's Ring camera to pick up, "You'll regret making this difficult." That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with an entitled HOA president anymore. I was dealing with a suburban warlord. I marched back inside and pulled the old filing cabinet from my utility room. Top drawer, 3rd folder from the left. The original land survey, notarized and time-stamped. I had GPS coordinates, elevation profiles, certified parcel boundaries, and satellite overlays from 2 different agencies. Every square inch of my land had been mapped, registered, and burned into county records 3 years before Blue Haven Ridge even existed. I spent the next hour photographing every document and uploading it to cloud storage. Then I called the Mesa County Land Services Department. I explained what happened. The clerk transferred me to a district engineer. I told him I needed a site inspection, urgently, and explained why. The man chuckled. "Oh, Karen's trying to annex property again?" "Again?" I asked. There was a pause. "Never mind," he said. "We'll send someone out." I didn't wait. The next morning, I drove into town, right to the office of Rocky Vista Geomatics, the best independent survey firm in the region. I'd worked with them during my years in the federal office. They knew the difference between a disputed fence and a full-blown boundary fraud. They agreed to start a complete GPS resurvey within 72 hours. I prepaid on the spot and asked for a priority report. I also requested a drone-based LiDAR sweep. If Karen wanted to play land games, I was going to drag her into a dimension of cartographic pain she wasn't remotely prepared for. By the time I got back home that evening, she'd left another letter wedged under my workshop door. This one was typed, single-spaced, and littered with phrases like good faith, amicable resolution, and avoidance of costly litigation. It ended with a highlighted sentence. This offer remains open for 48 hours. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the night pulling aerial images from public databases, overlaying them with my original survey markers, and preparing a digital war chest. If she thought she could erase property lines with Photoshop and bad intentions, she was about to learn the difference between HOA fantasy and land law reality. The survey crew arrived 2 days later, just after sunrise, in 2 white trucks with Rocky Vista Geomatics logos stenciled on the doors. 3 guys climbed out in heavy boots and windbreakers, dragging laser tripods and GPS receivers the size of lunchboxes. I greeted them with fresh coffee and a folder of the original documents, which they barely glanced at. Professionals, real pros, prefer their own readings. Fine by me. They set up along the southern edge first, working their way up the slope that bordered the HOA's property. I stayed out of their way but kept watch from the upper terrace, where I could see both my property and Karen's monstrosity of a house. The guys worked methodically, taking readings, flagging corners, double-checking pins I knew were buried deep and permanent. I felt a strange satisfaction watching it unfold, like watching a scalpel peel back a tumor. 3 hours in, I got a knock on the workshop door. It was the crew chief, a guy named Levi, solid type, ex-army, square jaw, didn't waste words. "Mind coming out for a sec?" he asked. He led me to the ridge line where the terrain dipped slightly toward Karen's estate. There, partially obscured by decorative shrubs and a fence line someone had creatively interpreted, was a bright orange pin, still flush with the ground. Levi tapped it with his boot. "Original 20T20 marker," he said, confirmed by GPS within 1 inch. I nodded. So far, so good. "Now," he said, pointing downhill, "take a look at this." We walked 20 feet toward the direction of Karen's backyard. He pulled back some ivy covering a rock wall, revealing another marker, but this one was clearly out of place. Whoever placed this one was off by about 30 feet. It's either a mistake or deliberate. He pulled out a tablet and showed me the preliminary overlay. And here's the kicker. Karen's back patio, her pool, part of her detached guest house, all of it's on your land. I stared at the screen. The red overlay showed her lot boundaries as they were recorded. The blue overlay, based on real GPS data, showed mine. Her estate was bleeding over into my parcel by nearly 8/10 of an acre. That wasn't a smudge. That was land theft. "I'll have a certified report on your desk tomorrow," Levi said. "This one's not even close." When they left, I didn't go inside. I just stood there for a while, looking down at her sparkling infinity pool. People had probably paid her to host HOA wine mixers there. Hell, she probably sold houses based on views from a terrace she didn't legally own. By sundown, I'd filed the first motion with the county clerk to register an encroachment dispute. I attached the old survey, the new data, a notarized affidavit from Levi's firm, and a formal statement of unauthorized structure occupation. Then I went a step further. I filed a preliminary cease and desist letter against Karen Hasslinger, personally, and one against Blue Haven Ridge HOA, collectively. Copies went by certified mail, email, and, for good measure, hand-delivered by a courier in a suit who I paid extra to wear sunglasses and look mean. I wasn't done. The next morning, I drove back to the county assessor's office and submitted an amendment to my property record, a formal claim of adverse occupation. That started a clock. If they didn't contest it with real documentation within 30 days, the claim would become part of public record. Karen must have gotten the letters by that afternoon. At 5 p.m. sharp, her lawyer, an actual one this time, called me and asked for a good faith sit-down. I declined. Instead, I posted a single sentence to the local Facebook community page. If you're going to accuse someone of building on your land, make sure your house isn't built on theirs. That's when things really blew up. Within hours, the post had over 200 likes and dozens of comments. People from Blue Haven, people I didn't even know, started asking questions. Someone reposted the map overlay, and then someone else, probably one of the survey crew, posted a before and after comparison using aerial photos from 2019 and now. Karen's house had grown. The pool had extended. The patio had been enlarged. But the land underneath? It was mine. That night, I sat in my workshop with a tumbler of bourbon, listening to coyotes bark in the distance while my phone buzzed non-stop. Private messages, screenshots, even someone claiming to be a former HOA board member who knew this was coming and had warned her months ago. I didn't reply. I just waited. Because now, it wasn't just about paperwork. It was about momentum. And Karen had just built her empire on my dirt. I woke up to war in my inbox. By morning, my Facebook post had gone viral, at least by small-town standards. The Mesa County Grapevine reposted it with the headline, "Who Really Owns Blue Haven Ridge?" Someone started a poll. Should HOA presidents know their own property lines? And Karen's name was front and center in every comment thread. She tried replying once, a bland paragraph about community integrity and disinformation. It was deleted within the hour after she started threatening to ban people from HOA events, despite the obvious fact that Facebook isn't a gated community. The next blow came from a very unexpected source, a teenager named Ben, who lived 2 doors down from her. He uploaded a drone video, shaky but damning, that showed her pool construction over time. Time-lapse. You could literally watch the concrete pore creep across my property like a slow-moving infection. By noon, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Karen this time. It was Greg Porter, a retired dentist and one of the original residents of Blue Haven Ridge. I'd never spoken more than a few words to him before. He stood there in a flannel shirt and a look that said he'd just had the worst coffee clutch of his life. "She's calling an emergency HOA gathering," he said. "Says we need to defend our borders." "Our?" I asked. He sighed. "Look, not everyone's with her. Just watch your back, all right?" I didn't like the sound of that, so I kept my cameras rolling and checked the perimeter twice that afternoon. The vibe had shifted. The HOA folks weren't just ignoring me anymore. Some were openly watching. Then came Sunday. Karen posted an open invitation to a community solidarity barbecue to be hosted that afternoon on the shared community recreation space at the rear boundary, which, as it turned out, meant my land. The very part where her pool, patio, and outdoor kitchen were illegally parked. It was pure theater. Folding chairs, Bluetooth speakers, wine coolers, HOA board members in pastel polos. She even had a local realtor handing out business cards near the grill. They were standing on my dirt, sipping Pinot and smiling like they were at a charity brunch. I didn't interrupt them. I filmed. Then I called the sheriff's office and Mesa County Code Enforcement. I didn't scream or threaten. I just calmly said, There's an unauthorized gathering on private land that's subject to an active property dispute. There are children present near an unpermitted pool. The officers arrived 40 minutes later. By then, someone had posted a live stream titled HOA versus Land Guy Grill Edition. It had over 1,000 viewers. I watched from the porch as the officers spoke to Karen, then walked her back across the property line, publicly and politely. They cited county records, GPS coordinates, and finally issued a formal warning of trespass. A couple of guests packed up early. Others followed. One of them muttered, "I told her this was a bad idea." The live stream ended with Karen scowling into the camera, muttering about retaliation and fake maps. That night, I took it a step further. I sat down and wrote a formal request to the Mesa County Planning and Zoning Department, asking for a comprehensive review of all structures, permits, and land use activities within the Blue Haven Ridge HOA jurisdiction. I worded it carefully. Not accusatory, just deeply concerned. In light of the recent revelations about boundary mismanagement and undocumented construction, I believe it's in the county's interest to ensure no further inconsistencies exist across the HOA's collective holdings. It was a simple, legal, beautifully bureaucratic grenade. By the following Thursday, the department issued a public announcement. Random inspections would be conducted across all HOA parcels, focusing on permits, zoning adherence, and environmental compliance. The kind of thing that makes suburbanites sweat more than a letter from the IRS. That's when the HOA message boards, which someone kindly forwarded to me, exploded. People realized Karen hadn't just stepped in it. She'd dragged the whole neighborhood into a regulatory nightmare. Rumors flew. Someone claimed their deck hadn't been properly registered. Another whispered that Karen had helped expedite approvals for friends in exchange for campaign donations. Campaign donations? Yep. Turned out Karen was planning to run for County Land Advisory Council. Because of course she was. And just like that, the barbecue became her Waterloo. The shared community space had become a legal minefield, and Karen had marched the HOA across it in flip-flops with a grill spatula. And I sat on my porch, sipped iced tea, and watched the fireworks go off. No matches required. The courthouse was packed. Not the way you see it in movies, with gasps from the gallery and dramatic finger-pointing, but the modern equivalent. Journalists in cheap suits, HOA members crammed into the back row, whispering behind sunglasses, a couple of bored interns from the zoning office, and at least 2 guys live tweeting the whole thing like it was the Super Bowl. I wore jeans, a blazer, and the expression of a man who had all the receipts and no interest in a settlement. Karen walked in like she was auditioning for a reality show. Perfectly pressed white blazer, hair sprayed to aerodynamic rigidity, and an expression that said, "This is beneath me." Her lawyer looked like a man already calculating how to salvage his career after this was over. The judge, Honorable Beatrice Lund, was sharp, no-nonsense, and not particularly fond of dramatic delays. She opened with a dry summary of the matter. Plaintiff alleges illegal occupation of land by defendant. Defendant counterclaims structural encroachment by plaintiff. Evidence includes official surveys, drone footage, correspondence, and local code violations. Court will now review. Karen's lawyer went first. He tried to keep it light, called it a regrettable misunderstanding exacerbated by mapping inconsistencies. Claimed the original HOA developer may have provided faulty measurements, and that Karen had simply inherited the mess. He even suggested that I had responded disproportionately by triggering a county-wide inspection initiative. Yeah, because following the law is somehow rude now. When my turn came, I didn't pontificate. I handed over certified documents, original surveys, geospatial overlays, and the GPS scan from Rocky Vista Geomatics. Then I showed the video of the HOA barbecue, guests drinking wine on my property, including a guest house and pool registered to her parcel, but built entirely on land I owned. Then I played a voicemail Karen had left for a neighbor, forwarded to me by a man who felt uncomfortable holding it back. Her voice on speaker. If we just keep pressure on him, he'll cave. That land's not even worth much to him. He's just doing this to be difficult. The courtroom got quiet. Karen's lawyer objected, hearsay, tone, who cares? But the judge overruled it, said the context was relevant to intent. Then came the best part. The county inspector, summoned as a neutral witness, confirmed under oath that Karen's house had never received final structure approval. The guest house was listed as a tool shed. The patio hadn't been permitted at all. The pool permit was pending, but had been pushed through, with the understanding it was fully within HOA boundaries, a decision made by a planning official who, coincidentally, had resigned last week. Then the judge asked the most important question of the day. Did the defendant have access to the official county survey before initiating her own boundary claims? My lawyer smiled. Yes, Your Honor. She had it in her possession, confirmed by the HOA archive request log, and she chose not to submit it in her original filing. That was it. Judge Lund's ruling was swift and brutal. The court found that Karen had knowingly built illegal structures on private property, acted in bad faith, and attempted to coerce a neighboring landowner into surrendering legal title based on falsified materials. She had 30 days to vacate the encroaching structures, pay damages totaling $820,000, including estimated land value, loss of use, legal fees, and punitive damages, and submit to a full audit of all HOA construction approvals conducted during her tenure as president. Then came the cherry on top. The judge ordered temporary external oversight of the HOA by an independent land auditor, citing significant lapses in governance and record-keeping. The courtroom murmured. One of the HOA board members actually slumped in their chair. Karen didn't look at me once during the verdict. She just stared straight ahead, jaw locked, hands folded like a bad poker player trying to bluff through a losing hand. Outside the courtroom, the press descended. I gave a single statement. I just wanted to be left alone. Now I'd like my land back. A reporter asked if I intended to enforce the ruling. I smiled. Oh, I'm just getting started. She didn't pay. The deadline came and went. 30 days, stamped and certified, and not a cent arrived. Not to me, not to the court. Her lawyer filed a motion to delay enforcement, citing financial hardship, pending appeals, and the usual scattershot legal spaghetti, hoping something might stick. It didn't. The judge denied the motion within 48 hours, so I did what any landowner with a binding judgment would do. I filed for enforcement. Colorado law is pretty clear on this. If a structure is built illegally on private land, and the offender can't compensate the rightful owner, the court can grant the landowner a claim to the improvements. That is, the house, the pool, the garage, the whole damned palace of fraud. Took about 6 weeks, all told. During that time, Karen went full ghost. She stopped posting on social media. Her real estate website was pulled offline. For sale signs went up on the edge of the HOA's front gate, but not on her house, likely because she no longer had the authority to sell it. Meanwhile, I was busy. My lawyer and I filed the necessary civil enforcement paperwork, along with property seizure documentation under Section 3833.3 of the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act. We had the judge's ruling, the valuation report, and the unchallenged deadline breach. It was textbook. Then came the site visit. The county sent a real property officer to walk the perimeter with me and a new survey team. We reviewed the blueprints, rechecked the markers, and took inventory of every asset now eligible for ownership transfer. I kept waiting for someone to object. No one did. That Friday, I stood in front of the house that had once been the pride of Blue Haven Ridge and signed the final form, full and legal transfer of property improvements to Thomas L. Edrington. The lockbox came off the front door. The title was updated. The land was already mine. Now the house sitting on it was, too. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. But I didn't just move in and stretch out on her patio. That house was tainted. Every tile, every faucet, every smug fixture reeked of pretense. It wasn't a home. It was a performance piece that lost its audience. So I did something better. I called up an old friend, Jack Trujillo, former Navy, now running a nonprofit for combat veterans in transition. We'd talked, over the years, about creating a place where guys could decompress. Not a clinic, not a halfway house, just somewhere real. Now I had space, and enough fury to turn it into purpose. We stripped out the designer furniture, removed the god-awful pergola, and converted the guest house into a woodworking and welding studio. Jack's team installed quiet rooms, blackout blinds, a commercial-grade kitchen, the infinity pool. We covered it, repurposed the decking, and turned the area into a rooftop garden and fire pit space. I kept the outdoor grill, though. It had style. When the opening weekend came, 5 veterans moved in for the pilot program. No press, no ribbon cutting, just people who'd earned something better, finally getting it. The HOA tried to object, of course. They sent a letter claiming my new center altered the aesthetic consistency of the neighborhood. I replied with a scanned copy of the court judgment and a sticky note. Aesthetic this. They didn't follow up. Funny thing happened after that. A few of the same neighbors who'd sipped wine on my stolen patio sent over gift baskets. One even came by in person to say she was glad someone was using the space for something that matters. I told her it was just a start, because for the first time since I built my house, I wasn't just defending what was mine. I was building something bigger on the ashes of their arrogance. Spring came late that year. Snow stuck to the ridge lines into April, and wild grass finally started pushing through by May. One afternoon, I was replacing a floodlight behind the workshop when a silver sedan pulled up near the edge of the drive. Out stepped Karen, thinner, dressed down, sunglasses too big for her face. She stood by the gate, didn't approach. I didn't wave. She didn't either. She looked at her old house, my house now, and then turned back to her car and drove off without a word. I figured that was her goodbye, or maybe her defeat. 2 weeks later, I installed a new sign right along the property line, big enough to read from the HOA's rear trail path, but tasteful. No neon, carved oak. Private property. If you think it's yours, bring a map, a real one. That weekend, some of the Blue Haven folks came by. No wine, no clipboards, just neighbors, finally. One brought pie, another offered to mow part of the West Hill since I'd done enough shoveling. As for Karen, word got around she lost her real estate license. The state board reviewed her conduct after the court case and pulled it quietly. No press, no scandal, just erasure. HOA leadership changed. Mandatory audits stuck around. The place got quieter. Better. And me? I finally got to sit on that upper terrace again with a cup of black coffee and the kind of peace I'd built this house for, only now I had 2.